With the regular season about like 16, 17 days away, I thought now would be a good time to go through the Eastern Conference, then Western Conference, and go through each team and just some questions I have about each of them. Starting us off is the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks. My main question is, who is their 5th starter? I personally think it's going to be Pat Connaughton, as he just makes the most sense. He already has played a lot of time with this team. He can fit in as shooting guard. He can slide up to small forward here and there. He's a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter, as well as just a spot up guy. I think he also hustles on defense and isn't too small to pair in the backcourt alongside Damian Lillard. And if it's not him, I just don't really know who else they have. The next major question I have is how good their bench will be. This is going to be a common question for a lot of top tier contenders who went all in this summer on their top 5, top 6. The Bucks are no different. I think 2 of Jay Crowder, Cam Payne, and Malik Beasley will need to be actually really solid for them to have good depth. We saw Cam Payne last year, especially in the Nuggets series, play very well in the playoffs. Malik Beasley didn't get that much run with the Lakers, especially against the Nuggets. Once again, he barely even saw the court, and Jay Crowder really didn't play at all last year, so those 2 guys are big question marks for me. As well as they still have some young guys, MarJon Beauchamp off their bench, who I think could be a promising young piece. And moving that kind of leads us to the next question: who is going to be locking up on their perimeter? They have Brook, they have Giannis, so I think their defense will still be really good just by those 2 people being on the floor. But when it comes to like the playoffs and you have to go against elite wings and elite guards, who is going to slow them down, and who is going to be that guy who can like really stick to a Tatum or Jimmy Butler when they try to mismatch hunt against their smaller players and Damian Lillard, Pat Connaughton? Can MarJon kind of step up to that role and be like an elite perimeter point of attack defender? I don't know. I think he's shown flashes, and if he can be passable on offense, I think he's going to have a lot more opportunity on this team. I mean, outside of their top 6, I think there's major question marks for everyone on this team. Moving on to the Celtics, I think the major question is how healthy their front court can be. Both KP and Al Horford are old. I mean, in Al Horford's case, he's old. KP just has a long history of injuries. And while I think a Luke Kornet can be okay in the regular season for like very small stretches, if one of or both Al Horford and KP are not playing for long stretches, I really worry about this team's ability to win regular season games. And when it comes to the playoff, if either of those guys are beat up, I really worry about them playing against the 76ers or the Milwaukee Bucks, and who's going to be stopping Giannis and Embiid in those types of situations if KP and Al Horford aren't fully healthy. My next question is, how good is Kristaps Porzingis on a winning team? With the Wizards last year, he had a career year, but he also had 0 pressure on him and no real goal to win each game night in and night out. So he could really play his way, and there wasn't other elite stars on that team taking the ball out of his hands or making the offense run through them, so he had a lot more flow and just easy access to his types of possessions. And with the Mavericks, he just wasn't good enough as a post-up player to warrant him getting touches over somebody like Luka. So I wonder if this will happen again, or how the Celtics kind of manage their offensive scheme. I think there's definitely certain spots in their offense, especially when they're playing against a zone, where KP can really thrive and just being a big body who can do stuff down low. But I also wonder, like, if teams are able to kind of pressure him a lot more and there's, other mouths to feed and there's less opportunity for him to get the ball in his spots, how impactful will he be on the offensive end? And lastly, is Payton Pritchard the backup point guard on this team? Who is going to be running the bench unit as the point guard? I think they might stagger Jrue Holiday early, like they bring him out maybe 4 minutes into the first quarter, just somebody who was like more of a defense first spot up type of guy, and they let Jrue Holiday run with the bench unit a lot. Or maybe they try to stagger like 2 of their main guys and like Kristaps Porzingis and Derek White at times, or maybe it's Jaylen Brown and Jrue Holiday on the bench unit. I really do wonder, because I don't think Payton Pritchard can be your main backup point guard, especially if you want him to do that in the playoffs. I just don't see that happen. Moving to the number 3 seed, 76ers. What the fuck is happening with James Harden? Is he on the team? Is he going to get traded? And if he gets traded, what are they getting back for him? This is a question that I think is going to be looming over the 76ers until James Harden comes out and says, I want to be here. And I don't think he's ever going to say that. Next, can Maxey take a jump? This is a question that's going to be more important if James Harden isn't there. If James Harden is there, he can still kind of be where he was last year, where he's just an elite play finisher, elite spot-up shooter, off the catch type of guy who can attack a closeout. But if Harden isn't there, does Maxey have room to grow as like an on-ball shot creator for himself as well as other teammates? He was definitely solid last year, but if there's no Harden, maybe Maxey can step into that lead guard role a lot more, especially if they don't get another star type of player back, which I don't think they will for Harden, I think a lot of offensive responsibility will fall on Tyrese Maxey next year. Lastly, what does Nick Nurse do to this team's offensive system, and how do players react? This is a little bit more of a complicated question, because if James Harden's there, I really don't know what Nick Nurse can do to this team's offensive system to make them ball move more. I mean, when you have James Harden and Joel Embiid on your team, you have like 2 of the top 10 most frequent ISO players, as well as guys who like to get the ball and really just take their time with it. Nick Nurse with the Raptors last year did not run a very focused ball movement offense. He let guys stand around a lot and let Pascal and Fred dribble the ball a lot. So I wonder if Nick Nurse is going to be able to spice up this team's offense and have a lot more off-ball movement as well as cutting. Moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers, where is Mobley's offensive game at? Is he a legitimate third option now, or does he still have a lot of room to grow? Like, I think this team needs Mobley to be a legitimate third option on offense, and I really wonder if he can reach that as soon as next year. As well as how will their front court hold up in the playoffs if they face a team like the Knicks or the Bucks or the 76ers, who have a lot of size down low, who's going to be able to push Jared Allen and Evan Mobley around. What do they do in those types of situations? Are those guys better prepared for those types of situations? And next, will Isaac Okoro grow into a legitimate 3-and-D player that teams have to respect? Or do Strus and Niang, one of those two, get the start over him, and can they be a legitimate 3-and-D player for this team? I think one of those 3 guys are going to need to hit and be really good this year for this team to have like a legitimate 5-man starting lineup, and I just don't know who it's going to be. Moving on to the New York Knicks, what does RJ do this year? He had a really good summer with Team Canada and the FIBA ball. He was balling out. 3-point shot was falling a lot higher. I think he shot 38% in the tournament. And even when his shot wasn't falling, he was still very engaged offensively as well as rebounding, and just found ways to impact the game without scoring. I wonder if that carries over, and can he grow into like a really good third option on this team and be like a low-end all-star type of guy? Next, does Brunson have enough level to reach? He was amazing last year. I think he was clearly an all-star talent. I wonder if he can get even better than that and reach an All-NBA level. I really don't know. His offensive game is really good. I don't know how much more he can get out of that besides just improving as a 3-point shooter. And defensively, he's never going to be great, but maybe he can be a little bit better than he was last year. Does Julius Randle fall back to earth? It's an even year, and Julius doesn't really play good in even years, it seems. He had a really good season last year. I don't know if he'll be able to build on it. This team's going to need him to keep up his level of play, or at least play somewhat similar to what he was if they want to make the playoffs again. Can the role players perform in the playoffs? Quickly and Grimes both really struggled in the playoffs. I understand that Grimes was hurt, but he just did not look as natural as you would like, and Quickly really struggled to do anything on the offensive side of the ball in the playoffs. So I wonder if these guys can be actual impact players in those types of situations. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets, Mikal Bridges keep up his play from the end of the season and be a real legitimate all-star and first option on this type of team? I don't really know. I would be kind of surprised if he was as good as he was last year to end this year, because I think teams are now expecting him. Teams are going to be loading up and game planning for him, and especially on this Brooklyn Nets team that doesn't have a lot of offensive talent and offensive weapons, teams are going to be really focused on Mikal Bridges. So I wonder if he can be as good as he was last year, but this team is really going to be living or dying with Mikal over the next couple of seasons. Next, does Ben Simmons reach back to his all-star form that he was with the Philadelphia 76ers, or can he be at least be a positive high-end role player? I feel like the range for how good Ben Simmons is next year is going to be massive, and it's going to be impossible to predict until we see him play. Lastly, does Cam Thomas get any real run this season? This team isn't trying to compete. There's more opportunities for the ball for other people to get the ball with no KD and Kyrie. I wonder if Cam Thomas gets some serious run this year. Next is the Miami Heat. The Heat are the best organization in the league at getting everything out of their players, but I really just don't know if that's good enough to win a chip. We've now seen 2 finals, being the 2020 bubble, where I understand they were hurt, but so was the Lakers to a certain extent, and this finals last year against the Nuggets, where they've been able to get to the finals, but once they reach a truly elite best team out of the West, they just don't have a chance. Like, they don't have enough offensive firepower to really threaten these teams, and while they're a great defensive team, they're just not that good enough, and the league isn't really built for like true defense first teams to win against offensive firepower. Secondly, do they have enough bodies to make it through the regular season? Jimmy has always missed a good chunk of the regular season. Lowry and Love are both a year older, and while Bam has been pretty healthy for most of it, that's going to be a lot of responsibility on his plate all year, and we've seen in the postseason him slow down by the end of it just because of the amount of wear and tear that is on his body throughout the entire regular season, and then the postseason having to do so much on the defensive side of the ball. I really wonder if Bam is going to be able to carry the type of load that's going to be expected of him for the entire regular season and playoff. And lastly, I kind of touched on this, but do they have enough offensive firepower? A lot of their playoff points came from their elite three-point shooting, and while they have been a great three-point shooting team for most of the time since the Jimmy Butler era, they've also struggled from the line at certain points, and in the Denver series, they really struggled against the line. They just couldn't score enough points. Even when Denver was struggling to shoot or they try to slow it down and make it ugly, Denver was always able to get into their offense and get points way easier than the Heat, and I just wonder if the Heat will be able to score in those types of situations enough. Moving on to the Atlanta Hawks, my major question is, does Onyeka Okongwu get the starting job by the end of the year, and can he actually be the starting center on a playoff team? He's a little undersized. He's a really good rebounder. He's not the best offensive player, especially outside of the paint, and Clint Capella is a really good, but he's old and he has some health issues, so I wonder if they're going to look to Onyeka to be more of their starter and bring Clint Capella off as kind of that sixth starter. I'm doing quotation mark because I just don't know if you want however old Clint Capella is to be playing as much as he did last season and then kind of run out of steam by the time the playoffs roll around. Next, what can Quinn Snyder do with a full training camp to this team's offensive system? I think we all saw last year that this team played very poorly on the offensive side of the ball. There was no real flow, teamwork. It was a lot of just like dribble. Okay, I don't have a shot. Here you go, DeJounte. Dribble. Oh, Trey, I don't have a shot. Here you go. And that's just not good enough to win against the playoff teams. So I wonder what Quinn Snyder can do. Lastly, does DeAndre Hunter have another jump, or is he just the type of player he is? And if he is, I don't know if they need him. Like, they might need to look to move him because he's making a lot of money. This team has been cheap for a really long time. And when they have guys like Jalen Johnson and AJ Griffin in their pipeline, maybe it's time to move a DeAndre Hunter when his value is a lot higher, and maybe you can get a good haul back for him as a prospect 3-and-D type of guy. Moving on to the 9th seed Raptors, the main question I think is on everyone's mind: does Scottie take a leap, and what does that look like when it comes to winning? And how does Pascal role adjust on this team if Scottie takes that leap into all-stardom? I don't know if it's a guaranteed. I really hope so. As a fan of this Raptors team, I really need Scottie to take a jump, otherwise we have nothing to look forward to next season, and so I just really wonder what Scottie looks like. Next, what can Coach Darko do with this team's offense? As I kind of touched upon a little bit with the 76ers, Nick Nurse had this team playing one of the ugliest styles of offense I've ever seen in my life, and everything I've heard from Coach Darko seems like he wants to come in, emphasize ball movement, off-ball movement, and quick decision making. He's talked about 0.5 offense, where a player gets the ball and is making a split-second decision, and I don't know necessarily we have the right type of players to execute that offense. Like Onyeka, OG, Gary Trent Jr. are a little bit slower when it comes to processing speed, but Pascal, Scottie, and Jakob are all really good at that. So I think the type of offensive system can work, but I really just wonder what that looks like on the floor. And next, how much small ball do we see with one of Pascal or Scottie at the 5? I think this is one of the best lineups that the Raptors can run when you have Scottie, Pascal at the 4 and 5, OG at the 3, Gary Trent Jr. and Grady Dick at the 1-2 spot. They're not really going to be the 1-2. They're just kind of playing there on the wing. That's the most shooting we can have, as well as having pretty good inside scoring as well as defense with Gary Trent Jr. OG, Pascal, and Siakam. OG, Pascal, and Scottie. I think those three guys can be an elite front court defense. And Scottie showed last year that he can play small ball 5 and make a living on the glass as well as down low. I think that's one of the best lineups the Raptors can run. I wonder how much we're going to see it. Moving on to the 10th seed Bulls. Do they try to make a win now move in this season after yet another disappointing year? Do they try to move Alonzo and some picks maybe? Or do they try to move DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic, and Levine by the deadline and try to just go into that full rebuild? I really don't know. I have no idea where this team's trying to go. Is Vucevic as good as he was last year? I think a lot of people kind of, I haven't watched the Bulls that a lot, but I think a lot of people have been really negative about Vucevic because of how much they gave up for him. And like looking at that deal, giving up Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter and Anthony Black or Jet Howard, I don't know which pick they got from the Bulls this year, definitely does look bad. And I think those three guys would have been better than Vucevic for this team. But at the same time, like, Vucevic was really good. He was like an 18-10 type of guy while being a really nice anchor on a top 5 defense. So I wonder if Vucevic can keep this level of play up. If he does, I think they should look to move him because I think he can help out out a lot of contenders? And do they still have a top 5 defense, or how much of that was due to Vucevic, Alex Caruso, or was that just kind of shooting vary? Moving on to the Pacers at 11, the major question for me is, can Halliburton stay healthy? Before he went down with like a pretty major injury in January, the Pacers were the 6th seed and had above 500 record. I really think Halliburton is kind of a guaranteed like top 10 offense at this point in his career, especially when you have shooters around him. And I think just by having him out there, this Pacers can be at least a play-in team. Next, what type of impact will Bruce Brown and Obi Toppin bring to this team? Both of the guys have playoff experience, and in Bruce Brown's case, championship experience. And I think when you're kind of a young team looking to make that push, having guys who've already been into those situations and played in that type of high pressure situation is great for the young guys. Lastly, does Ben Mathurin build on his last year where he was almost a rookie of the year type of guy and step into that second lead scorer role on this team? I still think Halliburton's going to be their lead ball handler and scorer, but I think Mathurin is like extremely well suited to play off of Halliburton and kind of just be like an elite play finisher, almost like a Tyrese Maxey with 76ers. Moving on to the 12th seed Washington Wizards, my main question is, how many shots are Poole and Kuz taking, and does anyone else on the team get more than 5 shots up a game? I really do wonder how much ball movement's going to be on this team and how much just bad shot chucking we're going to see from those two guys. Next, what does Bilal Coulibaly look like on the NBA court, and does he show enough flashes of being an elite two-way ring throughout the year? I really do wonder. This is a major swing move for the Wizards, and it's a right type of move because if he hits, this is the type of guy who can be an elite two-way stopper, switch 1 through 3, maybe even 1 through 4, and finish around the rim at a very high level and create for others. He played point guard up until I think last year, maybe 2 years, because he was just had like a massive growth spurt. So he has that on-ball creation rep. I really do wonder what he can grow into and how much opportunity will he have on this team being behind Poole and Kuz. I don't know how much those two are going to be able to facilitate like positive growth for rookies. Next, does Deni Avdija have more to his game, and will he be able to show it with less mouths to feed on offense? I really think Deni can be a good offensive initiator and creator for others. He's never going to pressure teams that much with his scoring, but he's big enough and strong enough to do something down low, and I think he has elite passing chops where if he has the ball in his hands more, he can really do something with it. Moving on to the 13th seed Magic, they were about a 500 team when they had Markelle Fultz in the lineup. Over the last 60 games, they went 29-32. I really do wonder, can he play more than 60 games? He's never been a super healthy guy who's been able to play above 60. I think he's extremely important to this team to play more than 60 games, and if he is playing more games, does he have the same type of impact on winning? Next, does Franz Wagner take a jump into all-stardom? I really think he can. I'm extremely high on Franz. I think he's the best player on this team, even though Paolo gets a lot of attention and has more opportunity. I really do think Franz is their number 1 player, and he had a great FIBA World Cup where he helped lead Germany to a gold as the second best player. I wonder how much of that carries over and if he can take that jump. And lastly, do they have enough shooting? Only Gary Harris shot above 40% from 3 on this team, and the second best player for shooting threes is Cole Anthony and Franz, both at 36%. There's a massive gap there, and they don't really have that many elite 3-point shooters, if any. And if Gary Harris gets injured, like, I just wonder how much spacing can this team actually have around those two guys, and Paulo and Franz. Moving on to the Hornets, the major question is can LaMelo stay healthy? He played just 36 games, and every time he was getting healthy, he dealt with another ankle injury. The Ball family does not have the best health record, especially with Lonzo and his knees, so I really do worry about LaMelo's health, and if he can stay healthy, then this team is going to be really good, but if he isn't, then I don't know what's happening here. Who gets the start at 5? Is it going to be Mark Williams or Nick Richard? I think it's going to be Mark Williams. He seemed like he played more in the starting lineup than Nick did last year, but I really wonder which of those two guys is getting that job to start, and do they look to move their vets in Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier, or do they keep them and just keep building with what they have and try to just do it the slow way, the Nuggets way? Lastly, the number 15 seeded Pistons. Can Cade Cunningham stay healthy? And if he is healthy, can he be more efficient as a scorer? I really do wonder about his 3-point shot, what he can do as like an offensive creator and initiator. He's a really good passer, but he has not been able to score efficiently at any point. I understand his ankle injury or his shin injury is not new, but I do worry about that. Secondly, do they have enough shooting Thompson on the floor to space the floor for guys like Duren, Ivy, and Cade who want to get downhill and attack at the basket. Outside of like Bojan Bogdanovic and I guess like Isaiah Stewart, they really don't have a lot of good shooters, and I wonder how much that's going to negatively impact Cade, Ivy, and Duren as they grow as offensive pieces, and as well as how much Ausar Thompson is actually going to play because he's not a good shooter and this team has terrible spacing as is. Lastly, what happens with their logjam of bigs? Coach Monty pretty much said Jalen Duren is getting the start at 5, and then he's going to have Wiseman and Bagley battling for bench minutes. I really do wonder which of those two guys is going to win that battle, and under that framework I think Isaiah Stewart's going to start, and I think that's a good idea because he can space the floor the best out of any of their bigs. I just don't know how much that's going to impact their game when it comes to winning, as well as will Wiseman or Bagley be a positive impact player by the end of the year. That's all my questions for the Eastern Conference teams. I'm now going to try to do it for the Western Conference. If you like the video, thank you for watching. Bye.